Inflation numbers for the month of June came out yesterday. We saw headline inflation hit a new 28-year high, 34.19%, and maintaining that uptrend for the 19th consecutive time amid worsening state of hardship in the country. You have the number there. See, food inflation is a major driver, 40.87, getting really close to 41. In spite of all of this effort, and we see the items that drove that food inflation to about 40.87. There is millet, gari, yam, groundnut oil, palm oil, and all of that. Now, let's drill down into this with the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewane. Mr. Rewane, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Good morning for having me, and thank you for having me.
Great. So I know you're not surprised. There was, of course, that forecast from FDC, and then we see it now. I know you did about 34% in your forecast. Does it meet your expectation?
No, we are actually accurate in our forecast. So that we expected that, and so it was no surprise. But let's get down to the meat of the matter. The truth is that inflation has increased, but it's also increasing. It was beginning to slow down, but it increased at a slightly higher pace. But the month of June, these are June inflation numbers we're talking about. Month of June, a couple of things happened. One, there was fuel shortage. Two, there were 3 or 4 public holidays. There was a Salah holiday. There was June 12. And 3, it was the end of the planting season, and we begin to see the beginning of the harvest season in July, August. Now, 4 is that people are resisting price increases. Incomes are down. There's a cost of living crisis, and people cannot afford. And if you look at the price that increased the highest, they were basic items. There was gari, there was yams, but the proteins, the proteins, which is meat, fish, meat, and other livestock, actually did not increase. So the big elephant in the room were actually the usual suspects, which is the cereals, the gari, yam, groundnut oil, palm oil, and millet. Those were now. 2 is the fact that we are beginning to see in the last day or 2, we've seen a drop in some prices, which quite strangely enough, while many have increased, as you can see from that chart, we are now we're going to be talking about pepper later this afternoon. But the price of pepper, which was 60,000 naira a bag a year ago, got all the way to 150,000. And this morning, it has dropped in Ibadan to as low as 60 or 70,000 naira. Why this movement? 1, there's been smuggling of commodities across the border. 2, there's a resistance in income. And 3, the petrol price increase is having a feeding effect into the price of commodities. And so people are basically going back to the basics and not the luxury goods. When I say luxury goods, the ostentatious goods. They are going back to the basics, the gari, the flour, and things like that.
So do we say that protein is also luxury at this time?
No, protein. The price of protein is a luxury because first and foremost, you must have the rice, you must have the swallow, they have the sauce before you now put the protein on top. So you can switch protein, different types of protein as you wish. But what we are seeing is that people are not increasing the quantity of protein they're taking. They're eating less chicken, less beef, and less fish in some cases.
Wow.
And that is playing onto the prices.
Yeah.
You know what happened with tomatoes? And it went all the way up, and now it's beginning to come down because the people substituted to carrots and other things.
Yes, other substitute. Mr. Rewane, let's talk about the efforts of the government. We know that the 150 import duty-free policy that was announced has been criticized by the president of AFDB, Dr. Adesina, looking at the impact it will have on domestic investments and farming and the agriculture sector. Now, yesterday we had that announcement of about 20 trucks of rice to be shared in states. Do we see these calming the numbers, especially food inflation? We see it's really getting close to 41%. Do we see it doing any good to those numbers and in reality?
No, the way to look at it is to look at it in two distinct segments. One is a stabilization phase where you have a crisis, and the other one is a long-term strategic phase where you now build capacity to increase output and aggregate supply. Now, what has happened now is these short-term measures, which is to import commodities, to actually force down the prices. It's just like akin to a patient who is in an accident scene and he has high blood pressure. You want to operate on him, you must crash the blood pressure down first before you now begin to you stabilize the patient before you now begin to treat the patient long term. The Nigerian economy is fragile, it's weak, it's actually tottering on the brink of a crisis, a debt crisis, poverty crisis, and also output crisis. Now, to solve these things, you need a temporary infusion of imports to bring down the price of goods, but it does not solve the problem. It only helps to ameliorate the immediate pain. The real problem is about growth, investment, and output. So all of those things put together, you cannot grow, really, if you don't solve the power problem. We can spend the entire money talking about the problems, and they are well documented. What we are talking about is short-term solutions, medium-term solutions, and long-term solution. What we are trying to do, or what I think I hear the policymakers saying, is that let us import stuff now and then get it to the people. But the fact that you are importing commodities, the fact that you have trucks leaving the warehouses, if they are leaving with anything, does not mean it gets to the vulnerable. The big problem is, who are the vulnerable? Who is identifying them? Is it going to be scandal-free? Is it going to be judiciously executed in such a way that the impact is felt? As we speak today, those things, there's the institutional infrastructure to ensure that those bags and those trucks of fertilizers, trucks of rice will get to the people in those states. I'm not sure that is going to happen, because I can almost assure you that those trucks, when they get to, say, my estate in Delta State, I'm not sure how it gets down to the people in the streets or in the markets of Warri, Sapele, Ughelli, Asaba, and others. So announcements are good, promises are good, but the truth is that until you feel the impact in the marketplace, it will just be another, what I call, pie in the sky.
Another reason to worry right there, in spite of that seemingly good news. And we still have the minimum wage. The president had promised that this week that will be resolved. Yes. But I know you've always warned us about the consequences of an increased earning for workers.
Now, the problem with the minimum wage, and I'm very familiar with this topic because I was a chairman in 2019. First and foremost, any increase in wages without an increase in productivity will lead to higher inflation. Any increase in wages which is totally out of line with their capacity and ability to pay by the private sector will create problems. So it has to be a three-way conversation based on honesty. That is, the government that is proposing it must be honest, must not be seen to be ostentatious and living lavishly. The unions must be realistic, because they know that the private sector, anybody who employs more than 25 people, if they pay it, we don't want a retrenchment of our workers. And the whole impact on macroeconomic stability has to be considered. It might sound simple, but it is not as simple as it looks, because if you know that we're coming from 30,000 2019 plus the 35,000 stipend which has not been paid, and then you now go on to the numbers I'm hearing, which are three digits or what you call it, that could actually derail a number of things. But thank God, the subsidies, the benefits of reduced subsidy will be plowed back, as far as the government is concerned, into the revenue profile. But that does not take care of the ordinary man, the ordinary entrepreneur who is employing people, who needs to generate some income and revenue to stay afloat, stay solvent, and stay liquid.
And I'm sure all of this will be on the table for the MPC, which is next week.
Yes. So what we are seeing is that with the inflation rate, the way it's going, we think that the MPC, our projections are the MPC will maintain status quo. The governor of the central bank at the CEO forum did talk about the fact that he expects, one, inflation to start declining. It's already declined. it's already increasing at a slower pace, and that he thinks at the end of the year, God will, touch wood, we should begin to see inflation decline and interest rates begin to decline. Because at certain rates of interest, it becomes very difficult to accumulate capital to have an internal rate of return which will make projects viable. So for us in July, we think that the MPC will maintain the status quo. But if inflation in July comes out and it doesn't move in the direction that we expect it to, that is, if it starts increasing again because of various factors, then in the MPC meeting in September, I think the central bank will have no hesitation and no reservation about attacking the interest rates again and making it move higher. But from what we can see from a equilibrium perspective, general equilibrium perspective, we think that inflation will moderate, except only one factor, or two factors. One, the minimum wage goes out of control and is not managed properly. Two, if the exchange rate continues to depreciate right now, it's at about 15.70, and we don't know what's going to happen. If the exchange rate depreciates sharply and the minimum wage goes out of control, then all bets are off. But, we are cautiously optimistic that there'll be reason at the end of the day that the government will rein in a lot of the ostentatious spending and, what I call conspicuous consumption, and that the government will also try to insist that the monies and the palliatives, or whatever you call it, get to the people and begin to moderate prices. But if it becomes a scam and the money, the goods do not get to the people, one. Two, ostentatious living and conspicuous consumption continues, then there'll be a breakdown in confidence and a breakdown in trust between the people, the governed, and the governing.
Mr. Rewane, yeah, obviously. And as you would always say, trust seems to be in deficit once again. The people need to trust. So even though we had that announcement, we do not know if it's going to get to the people who really need it so that the impact will be felt. But thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.